Very good morning, everyone. Hope you're well. So, I'd like to welcome you to our panel today, Building Africa's Digital Legal Infrastructure. My name is Moses Kemibaro. I'm the founder and CEO of .savvy. It's an honor to be moderating this important session. And we can see that we have leading voices at the intersection of law, policy, and technology in an age where artificial intelligence, cloud systems, and digital identity are redefining how institutions function, and Africa really faces a pivotal moment to build frameworks that are inclusive, trusted, and also future ready. So in our session, we're going to try and explore how Africa can translate ambitious digital policy blueprints into operational systems that safeguard trust, privacy, and innovation. And the idea is that we're going to go beyond theory and highlight real-world implementations coming from our esteemed panelists here, from AI-driven compliance to blockchain integration to cross-sector collaboration that bridges governments, private enterprise. As participants, I hope you will leave here with clear insights on how digital transformation in law can strengthen governance, can also enhance service delivery. We're looking at unlocking long-term socioeconomic growth. And at the same time, discussion will flow through 3 rounds of thematic dialogue, followed by audience engagement and closing reflections. I believe the instructions have already been done for our panel, so I'm going to just run right into it. And I'd like to start off with you, Phyllis. Thank you so much for joining us. From Microsoft's experience, what lessons have emerged about balancing innovation with both compliance and data sovereignty?
You had to start with the hard one. Good morning, everyone. Really excited to be here and to be having this conversation. I think it's a timely one, especially where we are both as a country and as a continent. So to pick from your question, Moses, as an organization, we've widely stated what our mission is, which is empowering every individual and every corporate to be able to do more. What we're doing, how we're doing that is through our solutions. And of course, so AI and cloud becomes a very pivotal conversation as part of our solutions. We are very focused on a messaging around trust. And if you think about where we are with technology today, or maybe I should just say across the world in different facets, if you look at where is the most trust right now is seated with the scientists, it's seated with the technology people, and that's driven by the fact that it's backed by data. So one of the things that we've looked at as an organization is actually, as we roll out our solutions, how do we continue to operate and to reinforce that we are operating from a place of trust? And that's not just in what we do, but also for the users of our technology. To be able to get that, the thing that we've done is build in AI principles and strategies that we not only apply to ourselves, but we also share with the companies that then would utilize our data. Now, you spoke specifically to compliance and sovereignty. I say there were difficult ones, but not really difficult. It's just that I like to say we have a joint responsibility. A lot of the time when we look at the technology firms, we're looking at compliance at what I do. All I can do is give you the solutions and make sure that I have policies in place so that I am compliant with the jurisdiction in which I'm operating. And I'll give an example. Microsoft just released a white paper, I think it's about 2 weeks old now, where we are actually demonstrating how our generative AI complies to the Kenya Data Protection Act. Why are we doing that? In making sure that we're a trusted organization, we are working to make sure that we comply both with global policy, but also local policy. And then what we do is we also share our AI, responsible AI practices with then the corporates who use our solution. So if, and I'll use an example of say a bank wants to use our technology, the one thing that we can assure you is your data is your data. And that is something that we've actually put in our policies and the contracts that anyone would sign with us. We do not use that data to train our models unless we have explicit approval from you to do that. The other thing is we are in every market offering AI skilling. Why are we doing that? Because as I said, it's a joint responsibility. There's a compliance that I drive as an organization, but also there is the other side where the users themselves need to also leverage the tool ethically. And so we are working in that regard. For data sovereignty, I think much bigger conversation, and I like that the previous panel also brought it in. One of the things that I will say very clearly, there are guardrails that we can put in place at technology companies, but at the end of the day, based on the kind of innovation every country, every company is trying to drive, there are guardrails that will need to be in place. So we can come to the table as technology companies, and we do come to the table, but what we've seen is based on, say, what Europe wants to drive, and I know that's a widely available conversation in the public, they come out and they've said, this is what we require. And then we build together in that regard. So there is that opportunity. If Africa defines guardrails, specific metrics is that they want to see around that, that then the technology companies will be able to come to the table and say, this is what we have to offer.
Thank you so much for that, Phyllis. I don't know that we have Shikoh on remote. Is she with us? Is she online? No, she's not. Okay. I guess we'll go to David. David, first of all, good to meet you after a long time. And as I mentioned earlier, I think Oracle is making lots and lots of waves globally. So we hope you'll share some insights from an African perspective. So when you think about, David, Africa's private sector and the support of the operationalization of secure cloud and data frameworks within regional, legal, and regulatory standards, how can Africa do this? How can we support that?
No, thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. And great to connect again, Phyllis, after a while. Yes, I think we private sector really has a huge responsibility in terms of accelerating, but not only operational, but accelerating the the adoption of secure infrastructure, and also obviously cloud deployments across the region. I think we're facing obviously a disparate change happening globally. So Africa right now is kind of lagging behind. If you see what's happening across many continents in Western, in the US, Europe, Asia, the announcement that we're hearing about data centers and infrastructure build out is absolutely mind-boggling, right? And really, it's upon us as private sector in Africa to not only accelerate, but also to really bring in the frameworks, whether it's the technical frameworks or legal frameworks that can help Africa accelerate, and kind of not be left behind. There's been this obviously conversation around, is Africa going to miss out the fourth industrial revolution? And it's almost feels, that if we don't do something, it's going to really, really be the case. And so it comes down then to what can we do? And then to your question, I think a lot of companies, both private, whether you're a big technology company or small technology company, we have, the skills, we have the resources that we can partner with governments and public sector to really accelerate some of the initiatives, whether it's in standards of infrastructure, build outs, or in terms of policies that can help, increase the penetration on adoption of cloud technologies. If you look at what we have now, and I think Ali did mention earlier, we have country specific, and I think we are 54 countries, each of us sovereign as we are. And we will not, if we remain this way in terms of data, we will remain siloed and we will lack investments, and we will definitely miss that industrial revolution that it's undergoing and underway right now globally. And I do think then we can bring on both our technical, our global experiences out there that we can really adopt in region, in country, and sort of bring harmonization of both legal and policy, frameworks that are, existing. I would also mention about obviously capacity building that we really need to bring forth. I think the likes of Microsoft, Oracle, and Google, and all the other players They are rolling out, massive training to the citizens, to the public across the continent. And I think this just plays a small role because it's a massive undertaking to educate, 1 billion people to be technically and IT to utilize some of these, technologies that are now coming on board. So I think the list is not exhaustive, but I think if we were to mention the key ones, especially as we progress, we definitely need to identify the areas that we can co-create or partner with governments to be able to really adopt some of the, as policy, as Phyllis mentioned, some could be that different for every organization or every government. But I think we can find a common thread that we can run across governments so that we can be able to take advantage of some of the investments that can potentially come into Africa. But if we remain siloed, if we remain individual countries, then investment will be limited, and I think we'll miss it out.
Yeah, thank you for those wise comments in terms of, I think the reality that we need to think more regionally than just at a country level to make it more appetizing, especially for the larger players globally. Phyllis, I'd like to come back to you. How is Microsoft applying AI to strengthen compliance, governance, and ethical decision making?
So again, I'll take this from a perspective of what we're doing internally, but also what we're doing with our customers and what we're doing on the national stage in different countries. So internally, our application of AI has, again, gone into our tools and some of the policies that we would have on how do we actually drive standardized compliance. How do we use AI to do compliance checks? And that's both from, I'd say, because we were talking about contracting earlier and making sure that we are compliant to the legislation and policies in a country. So we will have teams that leverage AI to actually look at the things that we're building. How do we actually work? How do they actually fit into the places where we want to deploy? So that would be one side. The other bit for me is our application with our customers. Now, a lot of the time when we think compliance, it's the rule of law, but there's also standards and the policies specific to industry. So one of the things that we've done is make sure as we're developing our solutions, we are meeting the guide rails and the standards for different industries. So there are certain rules that are fit for financial services, there are rules that are fit for AI, and making sure that we're building with that context in place so that then as we roll out the solution, we're working to also empower customers on the other side, the corporates on the other side that would use that. Beyond that, it's how then do we support our public sector partners, so the different governments that we work with. And that's both in sharing the standards and policies and principles that we have, but also by being participants in the conversation as they build the strategies, as they build the policy. So what that does is, because this technology is literally, and this is something that Bunei and I talk about, it's changing every single day. So you can't have static policies. We will need to build together. So part of the compliance bit is actually let's walk the journey together, and it's being able for me as we go through the different countries, leveraging the power of AI to actually understand what does compliance look like in each one of these jurisdictions. And how does that map out to then the larger industry compliance across the globe? So, and I'll use again the example of healthcare. Doesn't matter what I build or what AI policy we have globally, at the end of the day, there are certain rules that govern the healthcare industry. And so as we build, I need to be compliant to whatever our AI policy is or strategy, but also the healthcare industry guardrails for me to be able to provide the service. So we've leveraged AI in actually, one, being able to actually compile that, because it is quite a bit of data, but also helping train our teams on how we leverage, how we actually remain compliant and how we leverage the different policies in our market entry.
Well, thanks so much for that. David, I'd like to come back to you. And I'd like to ask you, how can blockchain and smart contracts reshape legal agreements and transactions are validated in Africa? How can we use those?
Yeah, so I think we're getting into a space that the technology would definitely, really change the landscape of legal. I think there used to be a story that a book I read many years back that showing the different industries and how technology would sort of change in terms of their existence or acceleration. And legal fraternity was kind of at the edge, not so much close to disruption from a disruption perspective. But I think where, to your question around smart contracts and blockchain, as you all know, with blockchain, it provides an opportunity to use technology to provide tamper-proof records that can be authenticated and referenced to, the master records. And so if I look at Africa landscape today, where we have a huge challenge of legal services, when we live in the cities, we kind of take for granted that you can get legal services anyhow, for even basic contracts. Imagine scaling that to the rural parts of Kenya if you have access to, of course, internet and connectivity, and you can go onto a platform and either renew a contract or access a contract that can be enforceable in law. And the scalability of that is a first phase, which I would say is a massive benefit, especially for Africa, where we are growing as a population, but also in terms of the challenges we have are still inherent in terms of access to, formal legal services or even contracting. So I think that's the first thing that I would think it will definitely accelerate across the landscape, and definitely just having a nation or a country that is able to, enforce, contracts. It accelerates economic growth. People can, reference a contract and be able to know that they are, they have, certain legal benefits. The second piece, which is more even critical, is the regional integration of different countries. So I think right now we all facing, as I mentioned, different countries are in different phases of their journey, either from data protection or in different phases of having, adoption of data policies that can accelerate, cross-border data transfers. And I think with blockchain, this is an opportunity for that to, be pervasive across the region, and means you can be able to reference data protection laws within countries and be able to, and ensure that there is sort of standards that can be enforced across the region. And it really comes down to everything that what blockchain can do. It might actually open up the opportunity for, investments. Means if Oracle or Microsoft putting a data center in Kenya, I know the data integrity or the variability, you can be able to verify that information if you're accessing that data from another country. And that has been agreed upon by, respective governments, and using a common platform like blockchain to be able to be the reference architecture for it. So I think it's an immense opportunity that can open up. And I think what comes even for me more, as an example, if I look at the informal sector today, it is a massive sort of population, and that population can benefit heavily, with adoption of smart contracts. It doesn't mean the legal fraternity should be scared. I think you should really accelerate the adoption of it. Probably there will still be opportunity for some form of intervention in some of the contracts. But I think for basic contracts, that should really be the case, that we should accelerate it and ensure that, with data protection laws that we have in place, it really aligns it very well with the opportunity to leverage blockchain and smart contracts.
Thanks so much for
Moses,
that.
I want to add something.
Yes.
And it's because of a statement I made earlier. We are operating in an environment that has a trust deficit. The value proposition of everything that David has said is the ability to verify and therefore actually be able to trust that what I'm seeing is real. We just saw a very clean, simple example of what AI is becoming. If whatever the front end might be, you know, whether it's an avatar, or if I'm able to actually have smart contracting, verifiable contracting, which I think is a place that, and a big opportunity for the legal fraternity to play. If I'm able to have that, then for the investor, for the innovator, I know I can trust what is in front of me, and I know whatever I'm building is protected. So it's an opportunity to actually deal with this big conversation about the trust deficit that we have, and the fact that beyond the investors, even for the innovators, I want to be able to know that what I'm building is protected.
Thanks for that additional perspective. And I like the way you put it, that, we have this trust deficit, where so many things don't move forward because you just don't know whether what's in front of you is actually authentic, and in many contexts. And I think you're right that if we can make these more pervasive, more common, and it becomes the ways that we work and the ways that we do things, transactions, then surely it'll make things a lot smoother and a lot less friction in the process. I'd like to come back to you, Phyllis, again. And my question to you is this: what role will AI ethics and digital inclusion play in shaping Africa's regulatory reputation on the global stage? And how can Microsoft contribute to this leadership? I know you're already doing a lot of things on the ground, but yeah, please expound and tell us a little bit more about the Microsoft perspective on the same.
I think I'll start with the Africa perspective before I get to the Microsoft perspective. And yes, Madame there spends a lot of time with me. um, Here's what I believe, and the reason that I am part of the conversation. We hear that we have to become a block. We hear that we have to build together. And I actually agree that there are certain things that to be able to take advantage of, we will need to become a block. But I do think we are still at the place where we haven't actually shaped or defined our picture of the future as Africa. So now I'm not talking as Microsoft, I'm talking as an African. And I'm saying this in this room because I believe the thing that we are trying to do is actually shape what does that look like and how are we going to play a part in it. We do need to come together in the next 1-2 years to actually shape what are we talking about when we say digital transformation for Africa, when we talk about a digital transition for Africa, when we talk about the adoption of AI. Let me just give some statistics that are actually very scary. Right now, within higher education, there's 63% AI adoption. We don't have a policy for AI in schools, but 63% of the students are leveraging AI. Now, we talk about the youngest population of Kenya and Africa as a whole. We also talk about that they're we have unemployment and underemployment within that population. So how do you explain that we have the highest access to smartphones? How do we explain that we have the highest amount of time spent on social media? How do we explain that we have 63% AI adoption in higher education?
Actually, I think it's globally, Kenya was cited as having the highest per capita uptake of ChatGPT globally.
So how, and I'm putting that out there because as we talk about now, how then do we shape the regulatory front? We need to be able to first articulate our context properly. If this is my scenario, that's different from what China, what India, what the US, what Europe is facing. I might not rush to putting together policy. It's important to start looking at what are the policies that are already in place that are allowing us to actually use this technology, and then what am I building on? I was very excited when Kenya decided to go AI strategy fast as opposed to policy. Again, because one of the things as technology companies we encourage is let's do sandboxing. Let's actually test what's going on and figure out then what are the policies, what's the regulation that is going to fit our context. Now, I'm saying this in a room with lawyers because actually, if Kenya and Africa is going to move, I think the voices that we've not had at the table talking about the need for sandboxing and policy labs is the legal fraternity. So right now, it's the technology people who are insisting we need these things. But to be able to build and innovate, we need you to come to our side of the table. So that's one thing. Now, what are we doing as Microsoft? Outside, I just talked about the fact that we've launched a white paper, and this is not, it's work that we're doing with Kenya, where we are demonstrating that the generative AI actually does align to the Kenya Data Protection Act. But beyond that, we've also done white papers with the Africa Union, and that's just to look at the overall digital transformation strategy and the vision that has been laid out for 2063. One of the things that I think has been really pivotal is our involvement. And every time we're invited to the table, I know it's ourselves, it's Oracle, it's Google, we do come to the table to actually say, this is what we're seeing from other markets. Now, I'm a big proponent of Africa doesn't copy. We need to look at what is the best thing that we can get from what exists. And then again, I will say, let's articulate our context enough to be able to shape then what's our position. And I'll give an example that is not a favorite example, but I like to use it anyway. No one is refusing to work with China, yet they innovate under their own rules. So why haven't we had the boldness to do that? Our context is different. We build M-Pesa, something that the world did not imagine could come together. And then we build the policies around it. So I do think we can take a leadership position, but to take that leadership position, we will need to actually define and what the future looks like for us. Now, so we share best practices as Microsoft. We participate in helping build. But I think the other thing that I will want to emphasize is the role of public-private partnerships. This will not happen with us alone. It's not going to be Microsoft coming to the table alone. And I like that we started with the first session had UNDP, because there's other players that need to come to the table to help us build not just the policies, but also the frameworks that would be required to actually achieve that leadership position.
Thanks so much for Phyllis. There's so much in there that you've shared. Thank you so much for those perspectives. And I kind of like what you said earlier about, the idea that sometimes regulation follows, but, it's almost like that saying, take action and beg for forgiveness, meaning that the train leaves the station and then it sort of catches up eventually. But coming back to you, David, as cloud and AI increasingly driving public sector modernization, what does the future of cross-border data governance look like? And within the African context, how can Oracle support that vision? Wow. If it starts with a sigh, it's a heavy one.
It is. The reason why it is because it really takes a collaborative effort. And if I was to paint a picture, what that is, I remember once I had a leader in my organization who 10, 15 years ago, he said, David, you got to see beyond the hills, around the corner or something like that. I think what we want to really see is really harmonization of data flows across our borders. It's absolutely important for us. It's curtailing a lot of innovation. It's curtailing a lot of investment. It's curtailing knowledge transfer and free movement of skills and people. And that's why I'm very passionate about it, because when I think about each country asking Oracle to build a data center in their country, you just cannot even answer that question. And so the picture that I would say is that the first one is get that data flows across the regions, whether physical or virtual territories, so that there's movement. And that obviously comes down to harmonization of the standards and frameworks and all the data protection laws in each country. That's critical. The second piece is helping, and then I'll come to what Oracle is doing, is just to ensure that there is obviously guardrails around data flow. So critical data, maybe for government, maybe things like healthcare and all these, classification of really highly critical data. And then that can be maintained in a sovereign manner within countries. And then those that can flow into the regional, blocks, maybe East Africa Community, maybe ECOWAS, maybe SADC, that can be, harmonized in such a way that data can flow so that we can be able to maximize. And then, of course, there is general data that can move across regional blocks like African trade, AfCFTA, that can really help, accelerate trade across many African trading partners. And so it means that picture, if you were to look at it, you have an opportunity to paint where I can access information in Ghana, I can access information in Nigeria, in South Africa, and that data is being, classified in the right manner. It's accessible and can be traceable and can be managed in the right manner. And it accelerates innovation, trade, and of course, public services so that people can access, whether it's applying for passports or visas and all that. And that is really enhances the whole landscape. I think lastly for me, that's why I'm very passionate about what we can achieve from really opening up that, frontier is what Oracle is doing, just having these conversations with governments around data. We can be able to, still have those classification of data. We can still be able to have policies that can enhance freedom and free flow of data without compromising your national data or national security. And also for purposes, of course, of achieving investment is to be able to allow investment into data center or such cloud infrastructure that can be shared by regions. So for example, if Microsoft is putting a data center here, they should, Tanzania, Uganda, Ethiopia should not have a worry that that data is somehow being, manipulated in Kenya. And that's the future that I paint, and I say, I wish I could see that picture in my lifetime, especially in Africa, because that's what we see in India, that's what we see in China, in US, in Europe, with the European community. I think we can achieve this. And I know with Madame, you've done an amazing job in terms of, enhancing that, and Kenya has been taking the leadership with, with the AU policies and with Malabo Convention, all these that have been put in place. I think we've achieved significantly in Kenya, but we need to do the same for the rest of Africa.
Great. I almost feel like she should be sitting with us up here. The assumption is we all know who she is. Karibu Sana. Yeah.
Moses, I think Shikoh is online.
Oh, she's back.
Yeah, she's
Shikoh.
yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Hi, Shikoh. How are you? I think I'm going to give you a chance, maybe at least to give us the first response that we posed to you. And the question was, how can Africa translate digital policy into practical and human-centered systems that work across borders, which I think is very much in tandem with the two responses we just got.
Awesome, thank you. Apologies for being late. We are fighting with the internet, as it is when you're in technology space. Anyway, thank you so much for having me, and that's a brilliant question. I always tell people, and I love what Phyllis has spoke about, lawyers and people and technologists not speaking to each other. Yeah, but there's another group of people that we don't speak to. Neither the lawyers nor the technologists speak to the people who actually are affected by what we build and what we write. Yeah. So when we say human-centered, I'm always asking people, I'm a techie. I can write code in anything. I mean, you can wake up me in the middle of the night and I'll give you a solution for anything when it comes to technology. But I do not understand what a health practitioner is going through, nor a farmer. And I mean, when you see a nice pitch deck in front of you, and with this like 28-year-old techie saying, I'm solving the problem of hunger in Africa, they talk with so much confidence, but they have no idea what a farmer in Africa actually looks like. Yeah. At 50, I was told 45, so I refused the 45 part, so I'm going to go with 55. A And the average age of a farmer in Africa is apparently a 45-year-old to 55-year-old woman, yeah, because they're mostly small-scale farmers who went to school up to high school, likely might not have graduated high school, but has some education. So it's not this thing, all African farmers are illiterate, all this. So when you think about it from digital action to digital policy, it has to start with the action part, yeah? Who are we serving? What are their key needs? Who are they? When I'm solving, am I solving for Phyllis, the Nyandarua potato farmer? Or am I solving for Phyllis, the high-tech executive who I met in Nairobi in a coffee shop, and they told me, my mom has a farm in Nyandarua, and these are the challenges they're facing. You didn't go to Phyllis, the Nyandarua farmer, because they're called Waboi, in Nyandarua, and understand what they are going through. So for me, it starts with that. Whether you're a technologist or whether you're a lawyer building policy, go back to the root cause, yeah? And it's called, in tech, to speak to all the techies, it's going back to the first principles. I know we love throwing the first principle phrase everywhere, right? What's the first principle of being a farmer, or being a teacher, or being a doctor, or being a health? We're always saying doctors, but 90% of the people who serve us in Africa are not even medical doctors. They are clinical officers and nurses, yeah? And sometimes lab techs. I'm so sorry for all of you who live in the village, yeah? Anybody with a white coat. We need to go and understand where they're coming from, then build up from there. That's how we translate our innovations. That's first of all how we come up with innovation, and then translate them into like actionable policy. Yeah, and I'm hoping that the lady who's being referred to is Madame Immaculate, right? Yeah, and I mean, and Madame Immaculate has done a good job. Has done a good job in translating. Like, when everywhere I go, we are model in terms of our data protection work. But she has the last few months of following what they've been doing, they've been very like solid. Is I'm going to default in what the customer, not the tech company, what is the customer need. And I'm hoping that with these lessons from the few 6 months or so, they're evolving the data protection to be more agile, but also more responsive to people actually need, because things are going to come out. So that is my contribution to this. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Shikoh. I think you've really been the voice of the customer here, or the ultimate stakeholder or beneficiary. So thank you so much for lending that perspective next to our big tech panelists over here today. So I think the last question I'd like to pose to you, and then we'll open it to the floor, is really to all of us. What must change in the next 5 years, to make digital legal infrastructure a continental reality? And then what sort of partnerships or frameworks are needed between regulators, technology firms, legal bodies to sustain that progress? And I think more and more what I'm hearing here, both coming from David, coming from you, Phyllis, and also from Shikoh, is that Africa needs to look at a more converged, more integrated approach. Because let's be honest, our economies are not interesting when they're standalone. But when we come as a block, when we put it all together, from the philosophy, the infrastructure, the regulatory pieces, and so forth, then Africa becomes interesting. So let's look at the next 5 years. What do you think happens there, Phyllis?
I started out when I said really, let's have clarity in terms of what is our picture of the future.
Yeah.
Both national, but specifically as a bloc, Africa. And I do believe we have the mechanisms and the frameworks for it. There's a lot of conversations happening at AU level. There's a lot of conversations that are happening at FTA around what will we look like. But it's just maybe not having those conversations as siloed conversations, but actually across the board. And I love what Shikoh said in bringing the perspective of who am I designing for? Because if we then look at all the policies, all the strategies that we have put together, but now from the perspective of the citizen, that should actually enable us to bring a lot better clarity around that. So next 1 to 5 years, let's have clarity on what we're building for. In that same context is once we've shaped that vision, being able to actually say across the different countries, do we actually have existing guardrails, and how do we integrate that? So I think both David and Shikoh have alluded to the work that Madame Kasait has done. And she's been championing the East Africa data flows, but we kind of need to go beyond East Africa to across the board, Africa. What are we seeing? And unfortunately, just because of the global dynamics, we're seeing a lot more of this conversation around sovereignty. Where does my data sit? But and this is a recent conversation I had with someone, all of us travel. All of us apply for visas. Where does your data sit? My data sits in whatever country I'm in. So when I say my data has to be in the country, what is it that we're actually dealing with? It's that I don't trust that if it's secure where it's seated. So, and again, I'll keep referring to the fact that I love the flow for this workshop because you started with someone who talked about cybersecurity. As we build the picture of the future, there is, yes, what we're doing in the digital, what we're calling the digital transition. We need to look at the existing frameworks and what we need to layer up to drive innovation. One of the things that we cannot do is use this sovereignty conversation to become the blocker for us building. And what we risk doing, the more I hear this conversation, it's actually we're shutting down innovation, cross-border innovation. So what you're likely to end up with is countries that went ahead and continue to develop a lot faster than the countries that are more focused on the data sovereignty. And I don't think it's going to be a conversation that's just led by the people on the panel or the people in this room. It's going to require that we are driving the conversation from the user perspective. There's a lot, well, Africa has a history of a lot of change happens because we get the grassroots to have the conversation. I said earlier, 63% AI adoption in higher education. The statistics of being number 4, I think, globally for ChatGPT. The users are already there. Are we putting together the policies, the regulation, the framework that actually supports that so that then I'm not losing out? Because again, back to the sovereignty conversation, how am I controlling this usage of ChatGPT if it's already in place? What are the guardrails that I have put? So I do think there's a wider conversation, and for us as a continent, because of the population that we have, everyone is agreed that our youth population is the future and it is a huge opportunity. How are we empowering that population to actually make the best use of the technology that's available?
Well, thanks for that, Phyllis. What about you, David? What must change in the next 5 years?
I think my own perspective is that obviously there's good progress that has been made, though in pockets of countries, I think like Kenya, South Africa, Morocco, and a couple of others, we see that progression, and I think whether it's adoption of the data protection laws and all that, so it's happening. But I think we need to accelerate that across the continent. I think we will not run away from the fact that they still need to invest heavily into infrastructure and connectivity. We've been talking about this for a while, and I think we're kind of lucky because in our country, that's been prioritized by the government. Last mile connectivity, access to internet, and all the way to to every part of the country. That's critical for every part of Africa to really invest and continue. So if it's 5 years, we need to see massive investment in that area, because we can talk a lot about this, but a lot of people will be excluded. Yeah, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. We can only access it in cities and towns that have internet, and probably schools and colleges. But think about the rural Kenya and rural parts of Africa do not have access. I think the last one for me is increase on this trust. The trust thing has to really be a fundamental piece that will tie everything together, whether it's a digital trust in terms of, I can be able to accept, as we know today, like Kenya, we have almost 22,000 services online. The fact that people trust that platform and they can transact, you can transfer a logbook from one person to the other, that's trust. Now imagine if we can scale that out and be able to reduce across the borders. I think that's going to be massive for Africa. That's my view.
Thanks for that, David. Shikoh, would love to hear your point of view as well. The next 5 years, how do we change things to make digital legal infrastructure a continental reality?
Okay, for me, I'm the more pragmatic one. Is we don't have 5 years. We have to start now. And I'll give an example. There's a project where we have been working with Africa Continental Free Trade Area. I know Madam Kaseit knows about it, of building a sandbox. And we said we are going to focus on just one vertical, and it's on health. Yeah. And it is basically saying, if I am an innovator sitting in Kigali and I want to start building something for the health space in Nairobi, what will it take? And can I be put in a sandbox to see how many of the rules in that country I'm breaking without getting arrested, and seeing if there are safeguards and guardrails that I can put in place to make sure that it works? Or like what Ghana and Rwanda have just done. They have just done a passport. They call it a fintech passport between Ghana and Rwanda, such that if you are a fintech working in Rwanda, you can just go and set up without any regulatory approval in Rwanda. Did I say Rwanda? Okay, it's one of the other. So you can it can be Ghana, Rwanda, Rwanda, Ghana. You can do that. And this is not something that has not been done before, guys. Yeah, it has been done before. In 2015, the One Africa network was launched. And it meant that I'm sitting in Rwanda, I can make a call to Ethiopia at the same cost. Yeah. I always tell people, when I go to Rwanda, I don't even bother switching roaming or buying a SIM card. I use my phone because it's the same cost calling and receiving calls in Rwanda, in Uganda, and Kenya, Ethiopia, South Sudan. Only I think Tanzania is not part of the block. Yeah. And you're supposed to spread. So it is an experiment that has been done that can pass. So as I was mentioning, so we have done this sandbox, and then quite recently, we've now just partnered with GSMA and the telco space to do it as a health information exchange. So we already have the rails. We have like a regulatory sandbox with the AFCTA, with a digital trade protocol. So it's being pragmatic and saying, has this worked before? Yes. Can we roll on the same? What do those people stand in the what is it called? Those things government says. Protocol. Can we stand on the same protocol and say it has worked before? I'm standing on the same protocol. It can work in this, but let's observe ourselves for the next 2 years. Because if we say we're waiting for 5 years for everybody to align, it will never happen. And I always say it's working with the people, the gang of the willing, yeah, the people who are willing, yeah. It's the countries that are willing. There are those 5, 6, 7, 8 countries that are going to do it. Rwanda and Ghana are doing it. Why can't Kenya do it? Yeah. Why can't we talk to central bank to say, can we be part of that corridor? I mean, we are the fintech central of the world. Yeah. Why are we not part of that conversation? Why should our startups be fighting to go to Ghana or Rwanda? I mean, at least Rwanda is easier, but Ghana and lots of West Africa. So it's being pragmatic and not waiting for 5 years and not waiting for the whole of Africa to come together, because we are in different places in Africa from an infrastructure point of view, literacy, policy point of view. Let's start with who are willing and move. And I mean, this is a challenge now to the Office of the Data Protection to see what are some of these things that we can start doing and moving. Me, I'm willing to help. And she knows I am willing to help. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Shikoh. I'm informed that we only have a few minutes left so that we can stay on schedule. So as opposed to allowing our audience to ask questions, I think I'll ask each panelist to give us their closing remarks in a minute or less each. A final insight, a final call to action, anything you think that would essentially add icing on the cake. And I'd like to start off with you, Phyllis.
I think I shared a lot, so I'll keep it very simple. We, as every industry is being disrupted. As Africa, we cannot wait to be disrupted. We're talking about missing out on a lot of things, but actually on the digital transition, but the missing out is the consequence of missing out is actually going to be that we will be disrupted. Our future will be stolen from us. So my encouragement to us, whether you're seated on the tech side, on the legal side, on the media side, as a consumer, whatever side you're seated on, start to think about how you disrupt yourself. How does innovation actually start with you, as opposed to us talking about it as a big concept?
Maybe before Bunei speaks, I think we can take 2 questions, please.
Oh, I think
Yeah.
we said we had 5 minutes. Okay.
Yeah, 2 questions.
Do we have any takers? Anyone who has a question? I don't know that there are any people also asking questions online. Happy to take that too.
Yeah, there are some few questions
Okay.
online.
So to who and what are the questions?
One was for Phyllis. I think they have sent questions to your WhatsApp group, as well. And the question is, it's a bit long. How do we have greater smartphone adoption? It's a happy accident caused by our unique circumstances. Landline reputation was dismissal, and mobile phones networks offered a more workable alternative. Fast forward a few years later, and smartphone adoption was a natural evolution. Now, we should learn from this. How do we take advantage of our unique circumstances to innovate before the rest of the world? Phyllis is right. Africa should not copy. So it's more of a comment and a question. How do we take advantage of our unique circumstances to innovate before the rest of the world?
I think it's back to what I said about articulating our context. Shikoh just gave us an example of solving for the very specific thing that is relevant for us, where if we're the fintech capital of the world, how do I then get to innovate around that particular use case itself? So I do think for us, it's looking at the things that have worked well. And I'll give an example of something, a startup that is Kenyan that has actually gone to the farmer that Shikoh was talking about. So this is a startup that worked with the reality around the farmer. The farmer gets his dairy products delivered to the cooperative by a boda boda rider. So what they did was empower the farmer and the boda boda rider to leverage AI without knowing they're using AI, using WhatsApp. So you send your data for WhatsApp. The boda boda rider also confirms they have received. They send that information. When they get to the cooperative, they send back the information of what has been delivered. No one knows that the backend is actually being analyzed using AI as data is. The farmer at the end of the day gets a PDF report on his WhatsApp. Your milk arrived, it was tested, it was this quality, blah, blah, blah. They never got to know. In fact, I was told, I think about a month ago, the chairman of the cooperative that was literally dying and now is thriving, a 73-year-old gentleman found out about 2 months ago that they were using AI, and now is the biggest advocate for these two. But the innovation happened around the thing that they already have, the mobile phone. They didn't go start talking to them about what AI can do. So for us, how do we take advantage of what we already have? If we have that huge smartphone adoption, are we using it? For example, we both, Bunei and I both talked about learning. Are we using it to drive this new skilling that we need for our citizens? The government has already taken advantage of it, which is why they went ahead and said, you know what, all your services are going to be digital. And none of us blinked. We were told there's no availability of anything else. We all went digital. We're happy to pay with M-Pesa. So the opportunity is there, and we actually we can take advantage of what we have.
Fantastic. Okay, so I'll come back to you, David. Your parting shots, your 1 minute, concise.
Yeah.
Feedback, yeah.
I think mine is simple, to be honest. I just want to say the legal fraternity, you have a massive opportunity now to transform and help, the landscape. I think the tech companies, I'm an engineer by training, and many years we've done a lot of from fiber and all that, but now it's time for legal to take over the mantle and really shape the environment that can help an acceleration of, all these technologies, but also, citizens of our African continent really to maximize and to be relevant in this century. And I think the young people also, have made a huge difference, especially those who are pursuing legal profession. I know we have one of your former colleague here, Edith, who is part of our Oracle organization and government affairs, really helped us really shape our environment here. And we need many of you to take up those specific verticals within the legal industry. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that. And Shikoh, would really love to hear your parting shot.
I mean, to the lawyers, I know this is an oxymoron. Every time you tell a lawyer, innovate, they say what our work is made of precedents of this, precedents of that. So there's very little to innovate. But this is a time to innovate or die. There are no two ways. I'm going to plug in. We in the last year have built an AI for a lawyer, because we know 86% of the people in our judiciary system are there because they can't access a good lawyer. So slowly, your job as a legal practitioner might just be going away, because there's somebody else, not just us. I'm sure there's other people out there who are building great AIs for the legal practitioners. And yes, at this time, it's being called a co-pilot for the lawyers. But the users who are coming to us are actually using it to get first-hand information, generate reports. It's called Hakii, HAKII .ai. This is to say that you need to sit down with yourself and see, where do we innovate? And you must innovate. You must innovate your career, but also you must innovate the industry. Yeah, where can you do, instead of doing precedents of this, precedent of that, can you do predictive of this, predictive of that? Yeah, based on, and you already have the historical knowledge. And as Phyllis was saying, what can we do? What are the what can we do to create these sandboxes in the legal space? What does a sandbox in the legal space actually look like? Yeah, it means breaking rules, and lawyers are not very good at doing that. Yeah, and it's testing the waters in breaking a few rules to be able to make new rules. Yeah, again, working on standing on the existing protocols, but what does the future actually hold? Again, being pragmatic. The world is not waiting for any of us to precedence this, precedence that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Shikoh. And I think that brings us to a really lovely close. Thank you to our panelists. I think that was wonderful. Please give them a hand. And I think maybe just to conclude or recap here, I think it's really about building systems that don't just serve today's digital economy, but also shape a just, secure, and inclusive Africa for generations to come. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the panel.